Hello and welcome to the Wilder Lincolnshire podcast from the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust. I'm Melvin Pryor. We're out and about today in a woodland area near to Gibraltar Point with the local warden, Richard. Hi, Richard.
Good morning, Melvin.
We're identifying birds, and this is the first of a series that we're going to do this. So we're focusing today on the woodland area. Quite exciting when we arrived because you heard a woodpecker.
Yeah, that's right. So quite a few species that we get in woodlands. It's really useful to kind of pick them out by calls and songs, because quite a few birds are kind of in the tree canopy or in the understory, so it can be quite tricky to see them. So having that knowledge of the calls and songs does help quite a lot.
So you know roughly where to look when you hear a bird?
Yeah, so it depends on the species. So, for example, on the understory, so like the bottom end of the plantation here, looking at things like wrens and robins. Whereas high up in the trees, you've been looking at things like the great spotted woodpecker, like chaffinch, goldfinch, and that sort of thing.
And it's interesting when you're listening out for the birds, they have calls and songs, don't they?
Yeah, so there is also a third one. So we do have songs, obviously just in springtime and summertime when they're trying to attract the mates. And then you have the calls. This is typically like the contact calls. So between the sort of different partners of the same species, and also to their young as well. Then you have an alarm call, which is quite different. So, for example, if a sparrowhawk goes over, everything kind of goes a bit crazy. Makes lots of different alarm calls. Often a good indication of a sparrowhawk. So I've used this quite often myself in the past. So you'll hear lots of birds a bit disrupted and a bit sort of confused. And then you look up and see a sparrowhawk just flying over or through the trees.
So again, that's a good identifier. If the birds generally get disturbed, it means there could be trouble in the area.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
or trouble for them.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
So let's focus on the first one we heard today.
Yeah.
It was the great spotted woodpecker. Yeah. You picked that up. I couldn't see where it was. So where should we have been looking?
Yeah, so typically with woodpeckers, so you hear that really sharp call, so it's really sharp chick, chick. And that often comes from like the sort of tree canopy or halfway up the tree, so depending on the time of year. So in the springtime, obviously when they're about to nest, you might see them quite low down, looking for like nest holes ready for breeding. But in the wintertime, maybe up the top of the tree, just kind of vary on the season. But typically quite high up in the trees, so you wouldn't get them very often on the ground. Whereas a green woodpecker, you would always get those on the ground. Usually when they're feeding on like ants and grubs and insects, whereas great spotted woodpecker's always in the trees, so you wouldn't get a great spotted woodpecker on the ground very often.
So just to help, let's have a listen to the great spotted woodpecker. Very distinguishable call there. And when we saw the woodpecker, well, actually, there was a pair.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, so again, this time of year when they're about to nest, you can see. So last week we had up to 3 birds, so chasing each other around. So it could be 2 males chasing 1 female, potentially.
Now, the great spotted woodpecker, you mentioned the green woodpecker. Yeah. Very different sort of bird.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, so as the name suggests, so great spotted woodpecker, so black and white woodpecker. And then obviously green woodpecker's quite green, ground feeder, great spotted in the trees, so quite different.
And again, what about the flight of a woodpecker? Is that something we should look out for?
Yeah, so with most woodpeckers, so the size, so typically sort of double the size of a chaffinch, very bouncy or undulating flight. So you see them doing this sort of flight as a bouncing. Boing, boing.
You're making a wave with your hand, which is great. So we watched that. And what about the sound of the green woodpecker? Is that different?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, so the great spotted, very much a sharp chick, chick, as we heard on the recording just then. Whereas a green woodpecker, a bit more of a yaffle. So you hear him sort of laughing almost.
So let's have a listen then to the green woodpecker to identify this one.
Yep.
Now, there is another that I've heard of, and this is the lesser spotted, but they're not very common, are they?
No, definitely not. So lesser spotted woodpeckers. So quite a few people get them mixed up with the greater spotted, but it's the size. So a lesser spotted woodpecker is about the size of a chaffinch, so really small woodpecker, half the size of a greater spotted. And also in terms of habitat, so very different habitats. So they favour sort of mature forests, so places sort of around here, I guess, got Sherwood Forest in Nottinghamshire, and then you're down to sort of New Forest on the south coast. So in Lincolnshire now, there's no breeding lesser spotted woodpeckers in Lincolnshire.
Oh my goodness. Just the habitat change, I suppose, that's put them off.
Yeah, a bit of a mystery. There's quite a few sort of factors maybe. So great spotted, they do get obviously interfere and impact the lesser spotted because they're much bigger woodpeckers.
Right.
So they will outcompete the lesser spotted woodpecker.
And the greater spotted, are these the ones that might be knocking on trees to make a hole in the trees?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so again, this time of year, so like March, April, you'll hear that drumming sound. So quite characteristic this time of year.
So woodpeckers, something to watch out for in the woodland. People might be able to hear in the background, very dominant sound. We've got, is it jackdaws?
Yeah, that's right. Yep, so jackdaw. So you can hear that call, check, check, check. It's quite a characteristic sort of sound this time of year. So quite similar to, obviously you got a few different species of corvids as well in the UK. So the corvid we know known as the crow family. So
I think we could probably do a special feature on those and identify what we're looking for there. Bird calling in the background, is that one of the tit family?
It is, yeah. So you can hear that teacher, teacher, teacher. That's the great tit.
And they are very good at mimicking other birds, aren't they?
Yeah, very much so. So the great tit's been known to imitate up to 60 species of bird in the woodland. So I often say if you hear a very strange call in the wood, it's often a great tit. So quite a few years ago, I was in the Sykes Farm office around our base, and I heard this perfect crossbill call. I thought I was getting quite excited, so I rushed into the plantation with my binoculars, and then got there and found it was a great tit, doing this perfect crossbill call.
So let's have another listen again so we can identify this is a great tit. So by comparison, the blue tit is another common bird. Different sound again?
Yeah, so again, very difficult. So blue tits and great tits. So I've got quite a few people that really struggle with those two, and they can be very similar. So I would say with blue tits and great tits, you need to see them, I think, rather than just kind of rely on that call. So they can be very similar and overlap a little bit.
So let's have a listen just to identify. This is the blue tit. And then one other to feature, which we might see in our garden certainly, but in the woodland setting as well, we get long-tailed tits.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, so long-tailed tits, a bit different. Obviously, when you see them, quite characteristic. They're very small body and the long tail, and they often make a little bit of a rattle call. It's a very high pitch, but followed by a couple of rattles at the end, as we can hear here.
And again with those, we often see those in good numbers, don't we?
Yeah, so in the winter, these birds often sort of flock together for sort of safety in numbers. So you can see flocks of sort of 20, 30 long-tailed tits. They also attract things like blue tits as well, and great tits and tree creepers and quite a few different species, and gold crests as well. Whereas this time of year, you often get them in the pairs. So now they're back to nest. There's been sort of single pairs this time of year.
So a good time to actually go out and try and identify some of the birds, because we haven't got all the foliage on the trees. So you can identify what we're looking at. And as we were coming through to the woodland area here, you picked up a sound. I don't think I've ever seen one like it before, a gold crest.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the gold crest got really high-pitched call. So we do have with bird songs, we have a song and a call. So the songs typically their display call. So that's what they use to attract the mates. And have also a call. This is more of a contact call. So once they've established a pair, they're using that call to contact with their partners or their young chicks as well.
So we get different calls at different times of the year?
Yeah, very much so. So songs very much spring and summer. Some species, you can get songs in the sort of winter. So for example, with robins, quite a few robins come across the North Sea from Scandinavia. So quite a few robins kind of then try and take up the territories of our UK breeding birds. So our robins then establish in those territories during the winter. That's why you hear them singing so much in the winter.
So we might think that the robin in our garden is the same all year round, but it actually could be a different one that's moved in.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, so from sort of October through to March, lots of Scandinavian birds come across here for the winter. That's not just robins, it's also things like blackbirds, song thrushes, fieldfares, redwings as well, that also come into your gardens.
So let's focus on the robin.
Yep.
Beautiful bird,
Yep.
associated with Christmas.
That's it.
But what about the sound? What are we listening out for with a robin?
Yep. So two things. So with the robin song, it's very, very rich, quite sweet song. Then the call's a tick, tick, tick. So you hear that tick, tick. So we'll play the call for you now.
And again, he's an easy one to identify. If you're sitting on a branch nearby, you will know. Sometimes, I mean, robins will actually come quite close to you as well.
Yeah, so particularly during the sort of winter period as well. So when the food's quite scarce in the woodlands, for example, they will come to your hand and into your gardens for the seed. So I've seen people actually feed robins in the hand as well. So a bit of like wild bird seed in the hands. The robins actually come onto their hands and fed out of their hands.
So staying with the birds that we associate with being a bit more common, the wren, I love seeing a wren in the garden and in the woodlands as well. Tiny bird, big sound.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the wren's quite characteristic. So when you see them, they're very small brown birds, one second smallest birds in the UK, with that long, they're very characteristic sticky out tail.
Yes.
And quite explosive call. So quite a loud sound for such a small bird.
So let's have a listen. This is the wren. And another bird that I notice sort of, I don't know, seems to be quite secretive on the ground, is that the dunnock?
That's right, yeah. So the dunnocks are, again, quite common in the garden. So you see these, if you've got like a bird table in your garden, you also see these feeding on the ground, or even on top of the bird table as well. So they don't tend to feed from bird feeders, but do kind of keep to the ground quite often.
And again, the sound of a dunnock?
And so it's described as fast, hurried warbling.
Right.
So we'll play the call now.
You can often see a male dunnock with several females, can't you?
Yeah, that's right. See, that's a quite promiscuous species. So dunnocks can have up to sort of 2 or 3 females on the go at the same time.
So we would think they'd be quite common.
Yeah,
are they a common bird?
Yeah, so quite interesting again with that one. So yeah, in the gardens are quite common, but here on the coast we have noticed numbers declining quite a bit. So in the last sort of 20, 30 years, the numbers have sort of halved quite a lot.
And I tend to think of a dunnock being a bit sparrow-like. So, I mean, there's a pheasant in the background there. Do we get sparrows in the woodland setting? And if so, what sort of sparrow?
Yeah, so again, depending on where you are in the country, so here at Gibraltar Point, we used to get quite a few house sparrows quite a few years ago, but now they're now completely gone from the nature reserve.
None at all?
Not at all. So if you go just half a mile up the road, there's quite a few house sparrows still in Skegness, but they just don't make the way down here that often.
Isn't that interesting how we tend to think of the sparrow as a really common, as we say, common or garden bird?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so in the past, flocks of hundreds here in the past, so in the winter period. So yeah, quite a change now.
Indeed. Blackbirds, again, another one you mentioned. Sometimes in the winter months we get them coming across from Europe. What are we looking at? You know, it's a black bird, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so the male's nice and black plumage, and the female's quite brown. Again, also the male's got quite a pale bill, so like a yellow bill. And then the way to separate the continental blackbirds, so when the male blackbirds from this continent actually got dark bills, so they can't still completely jet black, but they haven't got that pale bill that our UK breeding birds have.
And what about the sound again with the blackbird?
Yeah, so again, very, very rich sound, so quite similar to the robin, but say like a scale up from the robin, so much more powerful, much more clear notes, as you can hear here.
And then staying with a bird similar size, dare I suggest, to the blackbird, could we go into thrushes? Because I've noticed, you know, sometimes a thrush might be right at the tip top of a tree. Are they getting up there so they can let their sound go even further?
Yeah, very much so. So yeah, songs thrush right at the top of the tree, so they start singing quite early in the year, so they can be sort of late February time through March and April. I've actually got one in my garden at home at the minute. It's starting up at 6:30 in the morning every day.
Lucky you.
Just quite noisy.
And is it? Have we got 2 or 3 different sorts of thrushes that we could be listening out for?
Yeah, so you got there's the song thrush, which is typical sort of woodland species. So again, really rich calls and songs, quite similar to the blackbird. And then you have the song thrush, more woodland species, with the mistle thrush a bit more sort of open parkland. So like big country estates, they're quite common.
So let's have a listen first of all to the song thrush.
So you can sort of hear to imitate the same notes over and over again, a bit different to the mistle thrush.
Yeah, and this is the mistle thrush.
Again, quite a rich song, so quite similar to the blackbird. And I do struggle myself to separate the blackbird and mistle thrush, even after 20 years of bird watching.
Really? But as soon as you see them, you know the difference.
Definitely.
The other thing we tend to think of in a woodland setting are pigeons. But of course, we're used to seeing pigeons in our towns and our villages. Are they different pigeons in the woodland setting?
Yeah, so in the woodland, you get off to the classic sort of wood pigeon, whereas in your gardens at home, you might get things like the doves. So these are sort of derived from the sort of racing pigeons. They come in all different sort of colours and all shades of colour. So they're doves. So yeah, doves and pigeons. So pigeons much bigger, sort of double the size of a typical dove. So yeah, again in the woodland here, quite common breeding birds. They also migrate as well. So wood pigeons come across from the continent. So we've had days here of 8,000 wood pigeons migrating through in the morning.
Oh my goodness! So cool. There's a big number coming through. Are they the ones that might be on the fields, disturbing some of the crops as well?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so on the neighbouring farmland here, on the arable land, quite a few farmers do go drive around in the mornings and scale the pigeons off their fields. So you can see quite big flocks coming off the fields.
And then changing size again with the birds that we're looking at. What about finches? Do we get many finches in the woodland setting?
Yeah, we do indeed. So two sort of typical species are the chaffinch and the goldfinch. You do get greenfinch sometimes, but more parkland or in your gardens as well. So not so much woodland species, greenfinch.
And again, will you be able to identify, you personally, one finch to another finch? Have they got very distinctive calls?
Have indeed. So the chaffinch, so quite a rich song, quite a nice song. But you do find chaffinches do favour sort of mature trees. So if you've got quite a biggish garden and you've got quite a good mature trees there, you might get chaffinches in your garden.
So let's have a listen. This is the chaffinch. And then what about some of the other finches?
Yeah, so then you get the goldfinch. So goldfinch often described as like liquid notes, so quite liquidy, as we can hear here.
Really good. And again, identifying where that sound is coming from will then help you to train the binoculars and identify what it actually is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so things like chaffinches, so you're looking sort of towards a tree canopy, sort of halfway up the tree to the top of the tree. So you wouldn't get a singing chaffinch on the ground, always quite helping the trees. Whereas goldfinch, a bit more mixed. So you can get, obviously when they're feeding on the nettles and things on the ground, you can get goldfinches calling, but when they're singing, again, sort of halfway up the tree, but kind of that lower part of the tree rather than the top.
How did you learn to identify the birds and bird call? Is it a question of just listening? Do you listen to recordings? What do you do?
Yeah, a bit of a mixture, really. So there's quite a few good books and things out here. So, for example, we have this one here. This is the Bird Songs book.
Oh, it's got a built-in audio side to it.
Yeah. And so in the book here, we've got up to 150 different bird songs and vocalizations. So if you go into the book, you can then check. So at the top right of each page, you've got the numbers, which then correspond to the sort of dial here.
Excellent. So then that will then play the bird sound out to us. I mean, the other thing I've got like an app on the phone as well, which if I hear birds calling, I might put that on. Even if I can't see the bird, it'll tell me what's in the area. Again, you can then decide where to look, where it most likely will be.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so things like Merlin, really good bird ID app. So I was a bit sceptical myself at the first when I first heard about Merlin, but I tried it quite recently. I was quite impressed. It's about 90% accuracy, I would say.
So if anybody wants to identify birds, get a decent book, that will help you. Go online, have a listen to some of the bird calls as well. Hopefully people have learned a bit more from this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think really with birds calls and songs, also going out with somebody who is quite experienced. So when I was volunteering here at Gibraltar Point, sort of 15 years ago, I used to go out with a guy who's quite knowledgeable on birds calls and songs. So I was out with him every single day for about 2 or 3 years. Then after about a year or two, they started to sink in, but it took a lot of time to kind of get that initial sort of thing into my head of the calls and the songs. It did take quite a bit of time to get to that stage.
Well, I certainly picked up an awful lot from you today, so thank you very much indeed. Looking forward to this becoming part of a series where we try and identify some bird song. And if you'd like to know more, go to the website, the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust, and we'll be back with another podcast in another month's time.